Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Interstellar Modeler. In this video, we're going to spend time with the world's most famous 50-year-old infant. Well, hey everybody, and welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to be working on a figure, and what makes this figure different than others I've done in the past is a 3D resin printed figure. Now, this figure was purchased from a company called NY3Dcreations.com. Hobby Mike is a gentleman who founded the company, and I actually got to meet him at Wonderfest last year, and he's the one who introduced me to this whole idea of resin printing. Prior to that, I was only familiar with the filament deposition printing, and objects I've worked on from that type of printer had these noticeable striations, which are called ghosting, I believe, and apparently you can adjust a filament printer to minimize these sorts of things, but I've yet to see any objects that were printed to this level of resolution, and that's what Mike had told me, is that these figures printed with this resin printing process come out with higher resolution, just better overall appearance and smoother surface, and certainly when I got the figure in the mail that you're going to see here, it definitely is the case. I think you'll be impressed. If you go to his website, ny3dcreations.com, you'll see all kinds of figures he does have available there for sale. He's been doing this sort of stuff for quite some time. He had recognized the potential of resin printing early on, and so he hires sculptors to create some of these creations, or at least all of these creations that you see on his website, and he makes a point of not trying to of not reprinting things that are already out there. Let's go and take a look at this figure. It is of a 50-year-old child that has taken the world by storm, and that's Baby Yoda from the Mandalorian. So our model comes with 4 pieces. We not only have the Baby Yoda figure, but also we have the carrier. The carrier goes together like this, and the Baby Yoda figure slips into here. Now, if you look closely at the surface, you will notice fine striations. They're much finer, however, than what you'd notice with a filament printed figure. Hobby Mike tells me that these can pretty much be filled in with the type of primer that you use. He does not suggest using Stynylrez, which he refers to as a leveling primer. Rather, he'd recommend using an automotive primer. His best suggestion is what's called a high build primer, or you can use a filler primer. Now, the other thing you'll notice are these little nubs on some of the surfaces here. These are remnants of the support material that was needed during the printing process. You'll also notice some venting holes. This is important for the curing process. The holes can be filled in with putty, and he assures me that these little nubs can easily be sanded away. The glue that I'll be using for this is super glue or cyanoacrylate. Okay, well, I am ready to get started here, so let's begin. Okay, well, now that the sanding and priming is done, again, most of which was to get rid of the patterns that you see on the surface that are residual from the 3D printing process. I wouldn't say they're terribly obvious, but some of them were fairly noticeable to me, so I wanted to make it as smooth as I could. So now that that's done, I'm ready to go ahead and apply paint. The idea here is to first coat the entire exterior with Vallejo silver. Alright, well, what I have here now are some pictures that I'm going to use to help with painting the exterior of the carrier. Now, what I did was I sat in front of my TV and just started snapping pictures with my iPad, and by doing so I was able to get some pretty nice shots here to help us out as a reference. So this is a shot of the pod with the lid closed. This is when he first comes across the pod in the very beginning, and you can see that it's kind of white color that's been dirtied up. It's obviously been handled quite a bit. We've got a lot of areas of chipped and worn paint revealing a shiny metal surface, which is why I chose Vallejo silver as our base color. So for the paint, I'm going to use this Mission Models white, but I'm going to dirty it up with some washes so that it doesn't look too bright of a white. And then we also have these orange details along the sides, which need to be painted, and you can see the interior of the lid there, part of it anyway, is an orange color too. Now, it was a little difficult to get shots of the interior, but I do know that the interior here is this leather brown color, and that goes all the way to the back side. I did come across one other picture I'd like to show you, which I thought was interesting. If you look at this shot here, this is of the carriage empty, and as you can see, these silver bars or details go all the way through the bottom of the carrier. So I can definitely understand why something like this would have been easily overlooked, because unless you're looking at it empty like we are, most of the times you see the infant fully inside the carrier along with the bedding, and all of that hides this type of detailing. And so I would say the same thing goes with our model. I don't think this discrepancy really detracts from the model kit at all. Again, the way the infant is situated or seated inside the carrier along with everything else is just a detail that won't be easily picked up or noticed. So what I'm going to do then is paint these silver, and the blanket is going to be a dark brown, while Baby Yoda's outfit is going to be a tan color. And then I'm going to use liquid mask for replicating the chipped effect here. I think I can better replicate that with liquid mask because the areas are fairly large and kind of geographic, so I think I can get the best results with liquid mask. Well, what I ended up doing was using Mission Model's Insignia White and then lightly spraying it with white, pure white afterwards, just so it didn't look quite as yellow. So this is just a little more yellowish in color. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and peel away the liquid mask and see how that all turned out. Okay, well, as you can see, it turned out really nice, and we can refine this a little further by taking a toothpick or a fine brush and making some lines here and there to make finer scratches. But I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. As you can see in the light, it shines back at us, and in the dark, it looks darker than a bright silver, just like it did on screen. So very pleased with that. You can see the lid turned out the same way. Well, actually, before I do anything else, I have to paint these orange spots here. So we're going to go ahead and do that with Mission Model's orange. So I think the Mission Model's paints worked out well. It's a nice shade of orange. And we've got this on the cover as well. So let's go ahead and peel these away. These are just these little stripes. And so what I'm going to do next, before I apply a gloss coat, is just to refine some of these scratches. And then we will move on to some weathering. Okay, so here I now have the gloss coat applied, and I'm very happy and pleased with the way it's turning out here. And this is the lid here, or at least the cover. Okay, well, the interior is looking pretty good. It's still gloss coated. I will eventually apply a dull coat to the blanket, of course. I tried to put some highlights and shadows on the blanket, but it wasn't working out too well. So I do have some shadows there. Highlights aren't quite as obvious, but I guess that's okay because the cover will be over this anyway, so you're not going to really be seeing the back part of the blanket. So what I want to do next actually is to do a little bit of detailing on the interior of the cover, and then we'll get to the washes. So what I try to do here is to duplicate these panels. There are actually recessed lines inside this lid, just as there is on this side. So I just tried to paint in just a little darker tone, mixing in a little bit of black to our base color here, and then just trying to achieve a chipping effect with just using a toothpick and our silver paint. Let's just see how it all turned out. So this looks pretty good. Prior to trying this, I actually had attempted to weather the interior of the upper lid, and it just didn't look right, so I think this turned out much better. So into the final phase now of our carriage build. It's time to do the weathering, and what I'm going to do is not so much depend on washes, I think, as so much as to do these guys. The Tamyia Weathering kits I have here have some various colors I'm going to use in combination. Gray, deck tan, rust and soot and just apply that around the surface, because as I was looking at the pictures, it looks more smudgy, not so much dirty and grimy and muddy. So I am going to still use a wash in certain areas just to get into some of these tighter corners. I'm going to use Make Ammo's Starship Wash. Alright, very pleased with the way it all turned out. I did apply another gloss coat over it just to hold the pigment in place, but as you saw, the applicators work really well to provide that smudged appearance, and using the reference pictures were very helpful. Just a very light touch as you go along, and circular motions does the trick. You don't want to go too heavy, otherwise it'll look like heavy scorch marks. And just kind of did it all over using my reference pictures here. Let me show you the lid in particular. This is the picture I was using to go by, and this is how it turned out. So heavy bit of smudging here on this back side. Try to duplicate that with the Tamyia Weathering kit. And on the inside, it helped to go ahead and use the kit to kind of darken up the edges. The purpose for that is to make it look more 3D, because again, these are just painted on there. So when it's in place, it'll give it a bit more depth and more realism. As you can see, not much to assembly here, just using super glue here to glue the top to the carrier. Alright, and here it is. Placed it on its stand here, and we are ready to move on to Baby Yoda. So here we have the Baby Yoda in the carrier, and let me just go over what I have in mind with regard to painting him. So I went back and snapped a few more pictures from the TV set. This is the blanket that he's covered with, and unfortunately the figure's missing some of this texture here, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and paint it, however, the same color as the bedding, which is going to be the mission model's brown. The other things that we have to paint, of course, are his cloak, which is going to be this tan color, and the face. The face we're going to do last. So let's go ahead and start first with the blanket. Okay, so just slowly what I did was I built up the shadowing here, and might be hard to see in this lighting, but I have placed a gloss coat over them, so now we can blend in our highlights. The highlights are what really start to bring things to life here, so let's start with that. So for the highlights, I actually ended up using this beige brown rather than the Terra Earth. Just by brushing it onto the peaks of the blanket, ended up with some nice contrast. Alright, playing the same technique with the tunic here, I started off with Armour Sand as the base color, darkened it up for this crease, and then lightened it up with ivory for the highlights there. Okay, now onto the face. I'm going to play around with some paints here to see what I can come up with for his skin tone. Alright, so what I've come up with is a mix using these paints here. These are just craft paints that I've mixed a little bit of the blue, and I wish I could give you an exact percentage, but I just kind of went by what I thought worked well. I also have this on hold here to maybe darken it up a little bit, and some blue possibly. So let's go ahead and apply this and see how it works out. So the first coat actually looks pretty good. The primer, the gray primer, is helping out with the shade here, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on with this. We're going to go ahead and add our second coat now. So as my guide for the face, I'm using this shot here from a picture from Sideshow's replica of Baby Yoda. It's going to be coming out soon. Pretty nice replica. And I'm just using this here to help me paint these lighter areas around his face, and then we have to work on his ears. So let's try some beige red for this, And we'll mix in some of our green as well. And we'll see how it looks. So for the years, the beige red is working out pretty well. With the retarder medium, it's helpful because it keeps it from drying so fast and allows me to blend in the colors as you're seeing here. Let's go ahead and do the opposite side. I already started on that side. So just little by little. It's pinkest, it's most pink inside the inner ear. And then it kind of feathers out from there. And to bring out a little bit more detail in his face, I've added some ivory to our base color and just lightly applying some to the brows and the nose. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with the way he's turning out now, and the hardest part now is going to be the eyes. Let's go ahead and get started. So for his eyes, you can see he has very large corneas. There is an iris visible there, and but I didn't realize there was actually a little white that shows through on the corners here. So for the sclera, I like to use Vallejo's ivory with just a little bit of Feel Blue mixed in. Next, I painted on the iris, and for this I use Vallejo's black brown. And as I'm painting this on, I'm just making sure that I have an even amount of sclera showing on each side. Next is the addition of the pupil. And finally I added a white dot, and this represents the light reflex that bounces off a cornea. Okay, well he is all done. I'll show you the completed project in just a second. Alright, so here we're going to have the completed sculpt of the famous child referred to as Baby Yoda from the Mandalorian. The sculpt again is produced by NY3Dcreations, and the carrier measures 6 inches in length, about 4 inches in height. The figure itself measures 3 inches from head to toe. So I do give this model very high marks. When painted, the model does result in a very convincing replica. The likeness of the figure is exceptional, and the carry for the most part is pretty accurate. So I have to say, overall, I'm very pleased with the final results. The material is easy to work with, just as Hobby Mike had promised. Very easy to sand. Not a lot of work is needed with sanding, but you do need to do some. As you saw, the first thing you need to do is get rid of some of these nubs that are there from the printing process. You also have to fill in the venting holes. And there are these small little circular patterns that you see on the surface of the model that should be sanded away if you really want a nice smooth appearance. Now spraying in that filler primer will fill in a lot of these imperfections, but it makes it a little easier if you just take sandpaper and get rid of them. I ended up using 400 grit sandpaper and stepping up to 800 grit, and it did just fine. The other thing I had a lot of fun with was weathering it with the chipped, worn surface that you need to achieve. There's a lot of ways to do that. There are fluids that you can buy and things of that nature to achieve. And you can even do the hairspray technique with salt. But I felt that the liquid mask did a pretty good job at achieving those geographic, larger patches that you see on the studio mock-up. And as you saw, it was easy to apply and remove. And here are all the colors that I used for the build, and just to point a few things out, Insignia White I think worked really well for the exterior of the carriage. I just actually happened to have this on hand. I initially intended to use Mission Model's plain white, followed by some washes, but I really think this turned out better. I imagine the carrier would be bright white if it were just coming off the assembly line, but obviously ours here has been handled and stored in dirty places, resulting in that smudgy, kind of dingy exterior. So again, overall I'm very happy with this figure. It turned out pretty well, I think. I know at this point there's a lot of interest in anything that's related to this character simply because of the lack of items that are out there right now. And no doubt they are going to be flooding the market soon. But even when more items become available, I think this figure will still be desirable for the model builder. I just think there's going to be much out there like this for the model builder, so it gives the opportunity to do what we do best, and that is to work with model kits and paint them up, and of course the challenge is to try to make it look like you see on screen. And of course that is the fun part of all of this, right? So, so yeah, I really did enjoy working with this model kit, and I think you will too. Alright guys, well that is a wrap for this project. Just a couple other notes before we finish up here. First of all, the model does come with this little stand that you see here. The figure is available in 2 configurations. It's available in the regular version, which is what I have here, or the Force Yoda version, where the figure is leaning forward with his arm extended and his eyes are closed. Or you can also order the kit with both figures together. To order them both, it runs around $80 plus shipping and handling. A single figure is $65 plus shipping and handling. And that, of course, is subject to change. Those prices are as of today. This video is being published. So you can find it at NY3Dcreations.com under the Mandalorian The Child fan art, 1/4 scale. So it is a 1/4 scale replica of the figure. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at illustratedmother@gmail.com. Also, feel free to contact Hobby Mike at NY3Dcreations.com. He's a great guy, always willing to answer any questions, so feel free to touch base with him. All right, thanks again for watching, you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.